Asterisk, the evening rain had turned the dusty main street of Cedar Falls into a ribbon of mud and reflected lamplight. Margaret stood barefoot on the wooden platform, her thin shawl wrapped tightly around both herself and the tiny bundle in her arms. At 19, she looked older than her years, weathered by circumstances that had stripped away the softness of youth. The baby, barely 3 weeks old, slept peacefully against her chest. Unaware of the crowd gathering below, asterisk, ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd, we have here a strong young woman, experienced in household duties, and a healthy infant, perfect for any family needing extra hands around the homestead. Asterisk, Margaret kept her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the crowd. She had learned not to look at the faces, not to see the calculating stares that measured her worth like livestock. The baby stirred, and she gently swayed, humming a quiet lullaby her own mother had sung to her so many years ago. Asterisk, from the back of the crowd. Samuel Hayes watched with growing unease. At 57, he had seen enough of life's hardships too, recognized suffering when it stared back at him. His weathered hands, scarred from decades of ranch work, tightened around his hat brim. Samuel had come to town for supplies, not to witness what felt more like a tragedy than a transaction. Asterisk, the bidding began slowly. A few townspeople called out modest amounts, their voices carrying the casual indifference of those shopping for farm equipment. Margaret's jaw tightened with each offer, but she continued her gentle swaying. Whispering soft words to the baby, asterisk, Samuel found himself stepping forward before he fully realized what he was doing. His voice, when it came, was steady and sure. $200. Asterisk, the crowd fell silent. It was more than double the highest bid, enough to feed a family for months. The auctioneer looked surprised but pleased. $200 from Mr. Hayes. Do I hear the asterisk? No one spoke. Samuel's reputation as a fair but solitary man was well known in Cedar Falls. People respected him, but few understood his quiet ways. He had lived alone on his ranch for 15 years, ever since his Martha had passed. Some said grief had made him peculiar. Others whispered that loneliness had finally gotten the better of him. Asterisk, sold to Samuel Hayes. The auctioneer declared, bringing his gavel down with finality. Asterisk, Margaret's legs nearly gave way with relief, though she tried not to show it. She had heard of Mr. Hayes, a man who dealt fairly with everyone, who paid his debts and kept his word. As he approached the platform, she noticed the gentleness in his brown eyes, the way he removed his hat respectfully. Asterisk, ma'am, he said quietly, offering his hand to help her down from the platform. I'm Samuel. What might I call you? Asterisk, Margaret, she whispered, accepting his steady grip. Margaret Stone. And this is ... She paused, looking down at the baby. This is Emma. Asterisk, Samuel nodded thoughtfully. Well then, Margaret Stone, let's get you and little Emma out of this rain. Asterisk, the ride to Samuel's ranch passed in comfortable silence, broken only by the creaking of the wagon wheels and Emma's occasional soft sounds. Margaret sat rigidly at first, unsure of what was expected of her, but gradually relaxed as she realized Samuel seemed in no hurry to explain her duties or establish rules. He simply drove with practiced ease through the countryside, occasionally pointing out landmarks with quiet pride. Asterisk, that's Miller's Creek, he said as they crossed a small bridge. Runs right through my property. Good fishing if you're inclined. Asterisk, the ranch house, when it came into view, was modest but well maintained. A wide porch wrapped around the front, and warm light glowed from several windows. Samuel had clearly been living alone, but the place didn't have the neglected feel Margaret had expected. Flower boxes lined the porch railing, filled with late-season blooms that spoke of careful tending. Asterisk, I know you must be wondering about arrangements, Samuel said as he helped her down from the wagon. There's a room upstairs that gets good morning light. I think Emma might like that. Used to be. He paused, clearing his throat. Well, it's been empty for a while. Could use some life in it again. Asterisk, over the following days, Margaret waited for the other shoe to drop, for Samuel to reveal his true intentions or make his demands clear. But as September gave way to October, she began to understand that Samuel Hayes was exactly what he appeared to be, a lonely man who had acted from simple human kindness. Asterisk, he was respectful to the point of awkwardness, always knocking before entering any room she might be in, always asking permission before holding Emma. He had set up a small work area for her in the kitchen, where she insisted on earning her keep through cooking and mending, though he repeatedly told her it wasn't necessary. Asterisk, Mr. Hayes, she said one morning as she served him breakfast, I need to understand what you expect from me, from us. Asterisk, Samuel looked up from his coffee, studying her face carefully. I expect you to be safe, he said finally. I expect little Emma to grow up healthy and happy. Beyond that, ... double quotes. He shrugged. I suppose I expect we'll figure it out as we go. Asterisk, it was Emma who truly bridged the gap between them. Samuel had an unexpected gift with children, a patience and gentleness that made the baby smile and coo whenever he was near. Margaret would find him in the evenings, sitting in his chair by the fireplace with Emma sleeping contentedly in his arms, both of them looking more peaceful than she had ever seen them. Asterisk, you're good with her, Margaret observed one such evening, settling into the chair across from him with her mending. Asterisk had some practice once. Samuel replied quietly, Martha and I, well, that was a long time ago. Asterisk, Margaret didn't push for details, but she began to notice small things around the house that told a story. A child's chair pushed back into a corner. A small quilt folded carefully in a cedar chest. Pictures on the mantel that showed Samuel and a woman with gentle eyes, and sometimes a little boy who had Samuel's same warm smile. Asterisk, as winter settled over the ranch, their little family found its rhythm. Samuel would rise before dawn to tend the animals returning for breakfast that Margaret prepared with growing confidence in his kitchen. During the day, she would care for Emma and manage the household, while Samuel worked the land. And in the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sharing quiet conversation or comfortable silence. Asterisk, I never thanked you properly, Margaret said one snowy evening as they watched Emma sleep in the cradle Samuel had brought down from the attic, the same cradle she now knew that had once held his own son. Asterisk, no need, Samuel replied, but she shook her head. Asterisk, there is need. You saved us, Mr. Hayes, not just from that auction block, but from ... She struggled to find the words. From having no one in the world who cared whether we lived or died. Asterisk, Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Caring isn't a burden, Margaret. It's what makes us human. I've spent too many years trying to avoid it, thinking it would hurt less. He looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully. But watching this little one grow, seeing you find your footing. Here, it reminds me that caring is also what makes life worth living. Asterisk, spring brought new challenges and new joys. Emma was sitting up now, babbling happily as she played with wooden toys Samuel had carved for her. Margaret had taken over much of the household management, bringing an efficiency and warmth to the ranch that Samuel hadn't realized he'd been missing. Asterisk, one afternoon, as Margaret worked in the garden she had planted behind the house and Samuel taught Emma to pet the gentle old milk cow, she realized something had shifted. This wasn't just shelter anymore, or an arrangement of convenience. Somewhere between the shared meals and quiet evenings, between Samuel's patient kindness and Emma's delighted laughter, they had become something neither of them had expected. Asterisk, they had become a family. Asterisk, Samuel, she said that evening, using his first name for the first time. The formality had gradually felt more and more out of place. I want you to know that Emma and I are not going anywhere, not unless you want us to. Asterisk, Samuel smiled, an expression that transformed his weathered features and reminded Margaret of the younger man she sometimes glimpsed in old photographs. Margaret Stone, he said, I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather you be. Asterisk, as the sun set over the ranch that had become their home. Margaret understood something profound about the nature of family. It wasn't always about blood or legal bonds. Sometimes it was about two broken hearts choosing to heal together, about kindness offered without expectation, about love that grew gradually in the quiet spaces between words. Asterisk, Emma gurgled happily from her place on Samuel's lap, reaching tiny fingers toward the firefly that had wandered onto the porch. Three people who had started as strangers, brought together by circumstance and sustained by choice, watching the day end with the sure knowledge that tomorrow would find them still together, still caring for each other in the simple, profound ways that make a house into a home.